Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from Peter Krauth, author of the book The Great Silver Bull and editor of the Silver Stock Investor newsletter. And Peter, great to get you back on the call again here in January. As we record this, we are seeing precious metals prices ripping to all new highs in gold, 28.40 and above in the yellow metal today. Silver back above 32 in the mid 32s. We were both commenting off mic that almost every stock in our portfolio is in the green. I haven't seen that in a while. So, what's
Yep,
your take as we are recording this here on Thursday, the 30th? The precious metal sector has had a good January, but an amazing day today.
absolutely. Shad, thanks for having me again. And I will say, let's soak it up and enjoy it because it is nice and it is fun to see, these portfolios just absolutely rocking. Like you said, my silver stock investor portfolio across probably 30 plus names between ETFs and producers, developers, and juniors. Just one name is down just 1 cent. Every single other name is up, and I don't think I've seen this much green for a very long time. And it feels great. What's happening? I think that the market is concerned about volatility. They're concerned about really high valuations in stocks in general. And I think that the market sees, especially with new administration in Washington, and I can actually give you a really good example, but that inflation is, here to stay. The Fed had their decision yesterday. What I found interesting was that their language was a little bit along the lines of inflation remains somewhat elevated. And to me, that was pretty important. They removed some of the prior language that inflation had made progress towards their 2% goal and instead said inflation remains somewhat elevated. So, I mean, I've been saying for some time that it's going to be along the lines of 4% is the new 2%. At least for now, it seems like it's at least 3% is the new 2%. Maybe we'll get to 4%, but I'm getting the sense that they're acquiescing and they are finally caving to that idea that they're only going to be able to do so much. The dollar is weaker as a result, and a week and a half ago, I was in Vancouver for two back-to-back conferences, and one of the things that I was talking about was what I call the Fed's dilemma. And I said the Fed has really two options at this point. They either are going to stop cutting to fight inflation, but then that will worsen the debt burden for government, which of course we know has all-time record highs in the trillions, 35, 36 trillion. It's going to make life tougher on Wall Street and it's going to make life tougher on Main Street. Or their other option is to return to cutting rates, and that will ease the government's debt burden. It'll help the economy. It'll juice it a little bit, and it'll also allow for room in the future to eventually hike rates. Because when you turn around and do need to hike rates again, you ideally want to do it from a lower level. However, all of these implications of the second option of returning to cutting rates is inflationary. And my sense is that they are going to opt nonetheless for that option. And they are eventually going to return to an easing narrative. And they're going to do it. I think they're going to be doing it despite inflation staying high, let's say in the 3% range. And if that does turn out to be the case, I believe that will remove all credibility, if there is any left, from the Fed. And it's going, I mean, today I think is gives us a taste of what that would look like, a very small taste. But I think we're going to see precious metals and resources in general just absolutely take off in that kind of scenario. It's really, I think, it's my sort of working scenario in terms of how think things are going to play out, and how I'm positioning going over the next sort of several 3, 4 quarters.
Yeah, so maybe a nice sneak preview of coming attractions when things
Exactly.
start to turn. Well, and I'm glad you brought up the conferences in Vancouver because I want to go there next as far as I was able to sit in on a number of your talks, the main keynote address you gave at the Metals Investor Forum, and then also the panel. I also stuck around for the question and answer session after that with the same group of companies. But your address, had a lot of good bullet points in it. And then I saw you on stage at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference for the 2025 Silver Panel Outlook. And you were dropping some key nuggets of information for investors there. It was a great panel. You had Jeff Clark on there. Jesse Day was moderating, Peter Spina, Glenn from Silver Tiger. So that was a fun one. And you really shared a lot of information. Any other nuggets on the macro side of the precious metals that you want to share from either talk?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at, let's say, silver and what might be driving silver, and I'm going to say that the main point of my talk in silver, and this is, I think, perhaps one of the other reasons that we're seeing the metals move is the concern about inflation. And so obviously Trump is talking a lot about tariffs, not wanting to back down on that against, in particular, Canada, Mexico, China. There was even some threats against Colombia. I'm sure that's going to expand. It seems like it's effective, if nothing else, even if he backs down from them. But the threats are getting these other countries to respond to his requests. Things like tightening up borders, cracking down on the drug flow from outside to in towards the US, all these things. He's getting results basically just by threatening for tariffs. So just a few days ago, because I'm up in Canada, and because of these threats and Trump confirming that it's still on the table for February 1st, so that's 2 days away, that the Canadian government is planning a potential bailout package, a massive bailout package. We're talking in the tune of 60 to 80 billion dollars. So this is for businesses, it's for individuals, because they think that if Trump were to follow through with these big tariffs, that it would bring on a very severe recession, and that the economy would slow down dramatically, and you'd have almost a COVID type of scenario. Maybe not quite as severe where the whole world sort of stops turning, all together at the same time, but something pretty severe. I personally don't think that's the right approach, but if, it's very telling. And I think that for that reason, in many, many currencies, we are now at all-time highs in gold. So I wanted to mention that the inflation aspect, and relating back to tariffs, that was sort of the crux of my talk when I was talking about, what was potentially pushing silver right now. There has been for about the last 2 months, ever since Trump was elected and started talking about tariffs, that we've seen a lot of metal, silver in particular, flow from London, where I'm going to say they have the largest trackable inventories and where, say, the bulk of the metal for silver ETFs is held. We've seen big, big drawdowns in the metal, and we've seen the metal mostly flowing out of London and into New York and into Shanghai. We've seen a big drop in London inventories, and we've seen actually a pop in COMEX, New York COMEX silver inventories and in Shanghai inventories. And so the whole thinking there is that traders there were trying to get ahead of potential tariffs because they would, he never excluded precious metals or silver in particular. So the thought was, if ever they needed to make physical delivery in the US of their silver, they had contracts for, that if they did it after tariffs were imposed, that it could cost them an extra 25% from one day to the next. And that would absolutely crush a number of institutions. And I think we could even be, we might even be looking at some financial failures, some big failures. And I could certainly see that cascading or having a domino effect pretty quickly. So that was really, I'm going to say, the bulk of my talk, what I saw happening on sort of that side of things. There's something called exchange for physical, and it's a premium between the futures price and the physical price. And we've seen those premiums absolutely shoot higher in the last month or two. And again, that's signaling that traders are moving the metal to the US, and are willing to pay more immediately to have that physical metal in hand, just to avoid any uncertainties around the tariffs aspect.
Well, I appreciate you giving us a little color around that aspect of the talk that you gave, especially around how the tariffs could affect what funds and institutions are doing as far as the physical side of the metals, trying to get in front of some of this. It's going to be wild just to watch and see what actually gets implemented. We don't know at this point how much is talk and how much is action, but what we saw this week with Colombia could be a sneak preview of coming attractions with Trump. So we just need to see what this administration does, what the ramifications are. But what we can say is there's a lot of factors, even outside of that, that are playing into the strength in precious metals globally. And it's nice to see another year off to a good start, companies making money, producers doing well. But I want to hone in on the stocks because you do a great job of covering some of the junior space as well as the larger companies. But at your talk at the Metals Investor Forum in January, I sat through it, Peter, and you had a great cast of characters on there. You had the CEOs from 5 companies, and I thought it'd just be fun to dig in each one of them just very briefly and give people an update on the value proposition. The 5 companies you had on the panel were Blackrock Silver, Summa Silver, both there together in the Tonopah, Nevada area. And Summa has also got the Mogollon in New Mexico. You got Dolly Varden Silver operating in the Golden Triangle with both silver and gold. You've got GoGold Resources at the feasibility study on their Rico South project in Mexico, and Kingsmen Resources, a newer exploration company in Mexico, just getting ready to start their maiden drill program. So a nice cast of companies to talk about in the silver space. Let's maybe kick it off in the order we went through it there with Blackrock Silver.
Sure, let's do that. Sounds great. So BlackRock is, as you mentioned, in Tonopah, Nevada. That's about halfway between Reno and Las Vegas. And this is historically a very, very rich silver producing region. About 174 million ounces of silver historically and 1.8 million ounces of gold came out of there in only 7.5 million tons of material. This is in the first 30 years of the last century, 1900 to about 1930. And so it was known as the Queen of the Silver Camps, in fact, the Tonopah Silver District. Well, fast forward to today, BlackRock has a very rich 100 million ounces of silver equivalent. The equivalents come from gold, but it's still silver heavy and very high grades. We're talking 400 or 500, at least 100 grams per ton silver equivalents. They recently delivered a preliminary economic assessment, and that showed that the project has potential to be one of the highest grade, lowest cost silver mines globally. And it would produce 8.5 or 8.6 million silver equivalent ounces annually at an all-in cost of just under $12 for 8 years. So really, really attractive. They just raised, well, they were going to raise 10, and it was quickly upsized to 12 million. This is in the last few days or so. And, nobody likes dilution, but in this game, there's very little choice. It's about a 10% or so dilution to the company. But they need that money to keep exploring and keep expanding the resource. I believe that the ongoing drilling is going to do 2 things. It's going to shore up the certainty of the resource of the ounces, and it's going to grow it. I think we're going to see this go well beyond 100 million ounces. So if we can, let's just jump to the next ones, Summa Silver, and some exciting news there. Now, the first thing is they have 2 projects. The first of those 2 is the Hughes project, which is an immediately adjacent neighbor to Blackrock Silver's Tonopah West project. So that's in itself very interesting because between the 2 of them, they kind of make up that whole area in two large projects. They've been drilling for the last few years, and until maybe a week or a week and a half ago, had not produced any resources. And now I'm going to say this from memory, but between the 2 projects, so their second project is actually in New Mexico, and that's called the Mogollon project. Between the 2 projects, we are at about 78 million ounces, which is fantastic on the 2. Mogollon's a little bit smaller in terms of the total ounces of the 78 million. Hughes, which is in the Tonopah district, is actually the east side of Tonopah, and that is the larger part of that 78 million. Again, In both cases, very high grade silver. We're talking 600 grams per ton silver, silver equivalents. The equivalents come from gold once again, which is great if you're not going to be all silver. Gold is nice to be the byproduct. And it's interesting because, and that often seems to be the case. And so this is kind of interesting for your listeners. And I see this over and over. I can tell you because I watch silver so carefully and the stocks so carefully. It's almost as though, and many times it's in fact as it is the fact that you can almost wait until the important news comes out, and the stock will only move within a few days after that news. Would only move within a few days after the news, and that's really shocking to me. You can't count on it. It's not always the case, but in this case, Summa, if I remember correctly, it was trading around 28 cents Canadian, maybe 29 cents in that range. The news came out, the market yawned at it, and then within a day or two, it started to move. And then we were at 30, 31, 32, 33 cents. That's a pretty significant move in a matter of, let's say, a week or so. And I think it was just that the market needed a little bit of time to digest what was going on and what the news meant, and pretty impressive. So we're actually now I'm looking at it and we're at 35 cents today, where as I say it was about 28 cents not all that long ago. So that's a sizable gain in a matter of about a week and a half. And I've seen that happen over and over. News will come out, the market doesn't react much, takes a day or two to digest it, and that's your opportunity as an investor to maybe act quickly. And if you think it looks positive and the market hasn't moved, maybe take a position. And nothing's certain, but you actually have a chance to get ahead of a market move, and it can be pretty meaningful.
Yeah, Peter, I think that's a great point. Often we see these news releases come out and it takes a couple days for the market to digest it. So a lot of people think, oh, I've missed the move, even if it goes up a little bit. But often
Right.
there's a carryover for a next couple days where you start building momentum and the word gets out. And it takes a while for some of this to circulate and for analysts to work their numbers. But I want to ask you a follow-up on Blackrock and Summa. When I was at the Q&A session, I actually threw this out because both Andrew and Galen were sitting next to each other, both CEOs from
Right.
BlackRock and Summa, respectively. And I said, hey, you guys are next to each other right now on the panel. You're next to each other at the deposits. Should these projects be developed together? And of course, that's hard for them to answer in a public setting. I was kind of pulling their chain a little bit, but they handled it well. But in your eyes, do you see eventually a larger company coming in and consolidating at least the two projects in Tonopah, the Hughes and the Tonopah West, moving them together
Right.
into one larger project? Or do you think that they could actually get developed separately?
I mean, technically, they could get developed separately because BlackRock is already at that so-called magic number of 100 million ounces. That's what we've seen historically is what starts to move the needle and gets larger players interested. But I think it's just such a natural for these to ultimately become one project because they are direct neighbors. I'm talking literally, you know, across the road. Absolutely, literally across the road. There's a major highway that goes through. That is all that separates them geographically. So it would make absolute sense. They're both, it's not as if it's not looking as if the geology is really, specifically different between them, anything like that. So, I mean, whether it's some kind of combination of the companies or a larger player coming in and doing a deal, taking one or both of them out, I could see either of those things happening. And again, I don't want to, get ahead of myself or anything like that, but from memory, and if that memory serves me correctly, I think that I think that First Majestic is a significant, I wouldn't say huge, but a significant shareholder in BlackRock. So that may, point to some kind of a potential suitor at some point. Yeah, I mean that's what I have to say about it. That it just seems like a natural that somehow this would ultimately end up getting developed as one whole deal.
Yeah, it's just a little speculation on my part, but it's a speculation a
Sure.
lot of other people have made that
Absolutely.
it just makes sense
Absolutely.
to combine them. But yeah, BlackRock doing a good job to expand resources and also raise their overall grade profile. And really great work that Summa Silver has done, putting out its first mineral resource estimates on both projects at the same time, which you don't usually
Right.
see either. So both good
Right.
companies to have in the mix there. Let's pivot up to British Columbia, to the Golden
Yes.
Triangle, and talk Dolly Varden.
Yeah, so Dolly continues to advance their Kitsault Valley project that's in the Golden Triangle, as you said. This is a really big project, 163 square kilometers. It's high grade silver and gold since they took over Homestake Ridge a couple of years ago. And there's the historical Torbrit mine on the project as well. And this is considered to be very prospective to host further precious metals deposits. I mean, I think that because they're on the same structural and stratigraphic belts, we could actually, I think, very realistically find more high grade deposits similar to something like SK Greek or Bruce Jack. The work that they've done lately has been on the Wolf vein. It's been very impressive. They're getting high grade hits, very decent intercepts, and they have a young geo. I believe her name is Amanda Bennett. I hope I have that right. She's been doing some tremendous work for them. She, based on her her insights, her work and her insights, she's, had some ideas of where to go and drill, and she's been spot on. And at Wolf, she said, I believe this thing continues below the cap. It's not a vein structure that you can see at surface. She believed that it continued below surface, so they continued to drill it farther out and farther down, and hitting pay dirt. So the let's say the conceptual idea of the vein, that it would continue downwards, that it would dip, that it would stay rich, but dip downwards, is playing out as as expected or as hoped. So they're getting fantastic results there, and I think that I frankly could see potentially at some point some bigger player maybe wanting to take Dolly out as well. From what I know, I can't remember the percentage, but Hecla owns a good chunk of Dolly Varden shares, and so they are actually, if I have this right, they are actually neighbors in the Golden Triangle for one of Dolly's projects. It's not a silver project from what I remember, but it's literally a neighbor to a Hecla project. And as I say, Hecla owns a chunk of Dolly Varden shares, so that's something to get the rumor mills turning as well.
Well, I don't even think it's that big of a stretch because in addition to holding 12% of the shares, Hecla also has a board member on the seat of Dolly Varden.
Right,
And you're
exactly.
you're exactly right, Peter. I mean, right next to them, Hecla has a huge project adjacent to Dolly Varden's project. And then in the middle of it, to make it even more complicated, there is a copper project called the Big Bulk Project,
That's
where
the one. Yes.
Dolly Varden picked up the other half from Libero Copper at the very beginning of last year, at 2024. They finalized everything. So smack in the middle of Hecla's project is this copper project, which could be the feeder source for all of this, by the way. And then you
Exactly.
have the silver right next door. They've got a big stake. And we should also point out that about 10 years ago, they did try to make a move. I think it was in 2016 to acquire Dolly Varden back then. It was a different team at Hecla and a different team at Dolly Varden at the time. But that move's already been played in the past. And so it does seem like it's likely that there could be a business combination. One question I just have as a follow up on Dolly Varden
Sure.
is the gold side of the business. We talk a lot about the silver. They are Dolly Varden Silver, but they've
Yeah.
almost got 50-50 gold right now in that homestake area. And even at homestake silver, they're finding gold. And some neighbors that are on the other side, Goliath Resources, just had a monster gold drill hit that Sean Kunkun of Dolly Varden even mentioned from the stage during your panel that, hey, our neighbors just had this crazy gold hit.
That's right.
So what do you think of that? Like the gold plus the silver coming together for Dolly?
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. It really is. We've talked about this before. My filter for silver companies is that we need to have About 40% is sort of a minimum, a bit of a loose minimum, but that's my target for 40% silver content. If it's, a deposit, or 40% from revenues if it's a producer. And of course, I am more amenable to gold if the credits come from gold. So, yeah, I mean, the Dolly Varden has a lot of both. And I think that makes them very attractive as a precious metals player. It's unique. It's in a great jurisdiction. They just have a lot. I think this is really one of the higher quality names in the junior space. I'll put it that way for a few reasons. Like I say, grade, jurisdiction. If you look at things like vein width, accessibility, management, uh, neighbors, others who, as you mentioned, Hecla at 12%. There's just so much positive with Dolly that it's the kind of name that I hate to say it, at some point, it will probably not run its full sort of natural course. But then again, maybe that is its natural course to be taken out by someone else. This would not surprise me, you know, especially with a guy like Sean Kun. He's a deal maker, and so at some point it will be. I think it'll be a good deal for shareholders. But it is, at least for now, as far as I'm concerned, if I look at names on the junior side of the portfolio, this is one of the sort of core names is how I would characterize it.
Yeah, and I should disclose that in full disclosure, I'm also a shareholder of Dolly
Yeah,
Varden, and we have them on the show quite often and fan of the work they are doing. So he's made the case several times from stage that either they are going to become a mid-tier silver and gold producer, either through their own efforts or by being acquired by a larger silver or gold producer. Either way, in the end, they're going to end up producing metal out of this camp. And so exciting to see in British Columbia. Now let's pivot down to Mexico, because another thing
right,
you mentioned from the stage at VRIC was the improving permitting landscape and political landscape in Mexico. You had GoGold Resources as one of the companies on your panel at the MIF, and they
right.
just put out a feasibility study at their Los Ricos South project, another key milestone for the company, and they're close to getting their mine built. So they're actually a developer moving towards that pre-production sweet spot. So give us an update at GoGold Resources.
Yeah, so it's interesting. They are a little bit different. They're actually a producer. They are cleaning up a waste or pile in Parral. They've been doing that for several years now. That brings cash in, I think, to the tune of about 2 million, or just under 2 million a month. That's quite good. They actually brought on a zinc circuit to recuperate more zinc, and so they're actually getting better cash flow now that they've incorporated this. This thing pays itself off in a matter of maybe a few quarters, and so it was a very smart move. So they're actually generating some cash. Their big project is sort of two-pronged. It's the Los Ricos South and Los Ricos North. Los Ricos South is the more advanced one. As you said, they recently put out a feasibility, and they changed their approach with it because of some of the things going on in Mexico in terms of concerns about open pit mining. So what they did was they actually pivoted towards developing that, initially at least, as an underground mine. And Brad Langell, who's the president, is, from my experience, a very conservative manager. And he basically has said that they feel quite confident that by the end of March, that they will have their permit for to move forward in developing Los Ricos South. So to hear that from a guy like him is quite encouraging. I did, as you say, mention on the stage that there were two other companies in the last few weeks only that have had permits. So these are amongst the few since the new president is in. And so one of them is Avino Silver, and the other is Grupo Mexico. So these two companies have gotten permits in Mexico just very recently. So it is very encouraging. It does look like the tide has turned. Fingers crossed, toes crossed. So Mexico is the biggest silver producer in the world. We need silver coming from them. and we need a conducive, a business conducive environment. I think we are starting to get that. The first signs are very positive, and I know that some of these companies have been meeting with government officials at very, very high levels, and they're telling them that they're looking at priority right now in terms of, who we're going to focus on first in terms of providing the next permits. But it sounds very much like it's a question of when, not if. So that just looks a lot more encouraging than it has just a matter of a few months ago.
Yeah, and we just saw Alamos at their Mulatos mine get permits in Mexico yesterday, which is underground, but
There
that
you
just
go.
bodes well for the whole sector. So there's yet another permit to drop just in
Exactly.
January. So exciting to see Mexico improving on the map, and that really sets us up for Kingsman. The
That's
other
right.
company that you had was Kingsmen Resources. Now, this is something where they're going to be exploring an area that has some historic knowledge on it, but really hasn't been consolidated and drilled by anybody in the modern sense. And this is the Parral mining district of Central Mexican Silver Belt in Chihuahua. And Scott was on stage talking about the drill program. Give us your thesis here for Kingsmen Resources.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you said, Kingsman is higher risk for sure because it is a an interesting story where they are just now starting to drill. They have consolidated this package, the first ones in, I think, forever. This was not something that was the case prior. Scott's done a fantastic job with a couple of things. One is he has a very, very tight share structure. We're looking at, if memory serves me right, only about 23 million ounces. Sorry, 20, that would be nice. 23 million shares. And he put this together. He was very diligent, very particular about getting this organized. It took him months of research and visiting the right people to be able to get this consolidated. It's in Chihuahua, in Mexico. And so the project is Las Coloradas. It was mined underground in the 40s and early 50s by a company called Asarco, which is today known as Grupo Mexico. And even before that, the history of the area goes back about 450 years, and it produced, so it produced centuries before even the Spanish explorers showed up. This is about 40 kilometers from Parral City. And it's an epithermal underground high-grade vein system that holds a lot of, as I say, high-grade silver, gold, lead, zinc, and copper in a skarn porphyry. It's 845 hectares. It hasn't been explored, like I said, because it was fragmented and there was, an issue with sort of complicated ownership. Now, they've got great access, easy access, paved and gravel roads. It's on the power grid. There's water that's readily available, skilled labor in the area in Parral. They have all the surface rights agreements in place, and they have access and drilling permits. So they're going to be turning those drills very, very soon. They actually have a new target that was recently sort of pinpointed by their exploration team called the Saddle Target. It's farther off than sort of the historical stuff. This was from geophysical surveys that they did. An interesting member of the team, or let's say sort of two people that are sort of have been key to this. Trying to remember the first gentleman's name. There is a geologist who is part of the Electrum Group, and that is Tom Kaplan, who's been very, very successful, and in particular in the silver space, and absolutely continues to love silver. And another day we can talk about some of his other projects, but there's a gentleman, I can't, his name escapes me right now, but he's a geologist who's actually helped Tom become very successful through identifying properties and then those being explored and hitting pay dirt and growing them dramatically and using the drill to create tremendous value. That he's the one who first identified this product and pointed towards this new target called a saddle target. There's also a geologist who's involved with Kingsman by the name Mark Pryor. He was working at Gatos Silver. Now that First Majestic is taking over Gatos Silver, he's actually being retained by First Majestic, and he is, I believe he's an advisor to Kingsman. So he really knows this area. Gatos is not far off from the this Las Coloradas project. And so he knows these rocks, he knows the potential, and he's, I think, a key person to have involved in Kingsman. So yes, it certainly is, higher risk because the drills have not turned yet. We don't have any assays, but my view is that they know where to look. They know where the historical drilling has happened. They've done all kinds of geophysical, geochemical surveys. They've taken all kinds of grab samples, soil samples. They know where the odds are really in their favor, and I think that to be able to see the drills turning soon is pretty exciting. I think that given the history, who's involved, and the work that they've done so far, I think their odds are really high of doing very well very early. One last thing that I want to say is that, the historical work has been grades of by ASARCO of, sort of 300 to 500 grams per ton of silver only, plus zero point 0.6 to zero point 0.8 grams of gold, plus two to anywhere from 2 to almost 11% lead and 6 to 10% copper. So, I mean, it's just fantastic numbers that we've seen historically mined here, and I think that if that hits and hits well, this could actually be. I mean, I don't know if your listeners saw what happened to A-Mark just recently. Well, that stock took off. It was up, I think, like 70% in a day, like over 150 or 60% over a couple of days. I could see something similarly exciting happening with Kingsman.
Yeah, it's definitely a drill program that I think more eyeballs are going to be on just to see how things go because of the solid team, because they've consolidated the land package. And maybe just one more further note, just to tie together two of your panel companies here. They also hold a 1% net smelter royalty on the La Trina project, which is part of the Ricos North silver and gold project operated by GoGold. And Brad from GoGold
Exactly.
is who got Scott to come back to the business. Scott and Brad were talking with me in a candid conversation at the MIF
Yep.
and said, "Hey, Brad's the one that got me to come back into the business
There
again, and
you
they've
go.
worked together." So, and he made a $1 million commitment to Kingsman. So, a little bit of cross pollination
Oh
between
yeah,
both Blackrock Silver and Summa Silver as far as neighbors and friends, but also GoGold and Kingsman. So, and I think everybody
exactly.
likes Sean from Dolly. So, all five companies, great companies to have on the panel. Your talk was great at both conferences, Peter. Always appreciate you coming on the KE report, sharing how you're looking at the silver market and some of the physical side of the markets, but also the mining stocks. And if people want to follow along with Peter's work, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you over to the Silver Stock Investor newsletter, where you can follow along with the service and his analysis on the sector. And I'd also recommend picking up a copy of the book, The Great Silver Bull. It's still a great primer for investing in this sector. And as always, Peter, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Shad. If I may just very quickly throw in, I launched a couple of, at the beginning of January, a new service. It's a free newsletter, and that's for high potential silver stocks. Some of these are companies that are actually graduating from my paid newsletter to this new free newsletter. And if anybody wants to subscribe to that, just go to thegoldadvisor.com/registration, and you can sign up there.
Okay, and that goldadvisor.com is with your partner, Jeff Clark, who's also a great
Exactly.
person to follow in the space. So definitely check that out. Get on the free list with Peter and find out what he's writing about.
Thank you so much, Chad. I appreciate it.